To speak about today about the Turkey history of Jews in Turkey. I'll take you mainly on a road trip. Due to COVID, this past summer, or it's part of what I do is in Turkey for the past 20 years is inspect various food facilities, food manufacturing facilities to make sure that they adhere to the kosher rules and regulations. So when you go to your markets in America and food have on them a kosher symbol, an OU or an OK, big part of the food market in the US comes from Turkey. Turkey produces 80% of hazelnuts in the world, some 70% of dried figs and apricots, large percentage of olives, and many other regular food staples which are used whether in manufacturing facilities or bought off the shelf are produced in Turkey. Due to COVID, we couldn't do inspection for 4 or 5 months, couldn't board planes in order to go and visit the plants. Had no choice, and I embarked on a road trip with my son that covered some 6,000 miles. I went all over Turkey and visited some 100 or so food manufacturing facilities. While doing so, we also visited ancient and present Jewish communities. We took our bikes with us, rode the horses, as you will see. So I welcome you to join me on the road trip. Let's see if I have the ability here to share my screen. Here I am.
While you're sharing your screen, I just want to mention there's going to be a question and answer at the end. So you can mark that down. If you want to put your questions, you could add it in the chat box so we could address it either as Rabbi Mendy goes along, if it's current, or we could address it as we get to the end.
I was sure I'm going to answer all the questions in my talk.
That's what we think.
How do you know? Okay, anyway, so let's get on the road. Jews have lived in Turkey for some 2,700 years, quite a long time. In the map in front of us, which is a map more or less of current Turkey, we could see a whole bunch of red circles. These are ancient Jewish settlements or ancient cities where Jews lived in what is known today as Anatolia, Asia Minor. In antiquity, Jews lived all over these places. Ancient Jewish synagogues were found in different archaeological digs all over Turkey. Finding old synagogues is a hobby of mine. I love riding bike, and you'll see pictures of my bike too. On this road trip, we packed 2 bikes, one for me, one for my son. And every morning before I went to visit the plant, I got onto a bike. But here, this one is in Istanbul, not the capital of Turkey, but definitely the largest city of Turkey, the city where I lived for the past 20 years. Istanbul is a home for some 20 plus million people and about 10 or 12,000 Jews, and is also dotted with a whole bunch of ruined synagogues. This synagogue, for example, in Kuruçeşme in Turkey, some 10-minute bike ride from my house, is an ancient synagogue. Looks ancient, but not that ancient. Some 150 years ago, was built by Jews who came from Ukraine. Russian Ashkenazi Jews have lived, built, and occupied this synagogue until it was in use for about 100 years, until the year 48, when people in Kuruçeşme have moved mostly to Israel. It's right here, not far from my house. On another bike trip, one very early morning, I found this door. It's an auto repair shop. It was locked Sunday morning, but right on top of it, it says Kilak Tosha Eliyahu, a holy congregation Eliyahu, in year Tafresh Nun Vav, which corresponds to about 104 years ago, or 114 years ago. That is when this synagogue was apparently built. No more synagogue, an auto repair shop today in Istanbul. But we'll see that Turkey is dotted with a whole bunch of interesting Jewish remains. Not this cow, but right next to this cow is actually perhaps the birthplace of the Jewish people. This actual well was mentioned in last week's Torah portion. This well is none other than Jacob's well. Right here, next to this well, is where Jacob met Rachel. We read it last week in Torah portion. I'm sure you went to this, if you heard about it from the rabbi. Till today, it's called the well of Jacob the prophet. It is next to the ancient city of Haran. This is the city of Haran. That's how it looks today, untouched for some 3,300 years since Abraham lived here together with Sarah. This is where Abraham sent Eliezer, his servant, to fetch Rebekah as a wife for Isaac. This is exactly the place where Jacob ran away from the anger of his older brother Esau. This is where he married Rachel and Leah, and where he had 11 of his 12 kids. Right here, on this land, this ground, the city of Haran. So I was walking here with my son, and I couldn't stop thinking, I'm standing on the actual ground where Abraham walked. We were sitting there, I started dancing with my son. I said, wow. We saw a camel there. It's probably a descendant of one of those camels that Eliezer brought as a gift for Laban. We're sitting there, and every place where I went, made some a Zoom video, posted it on my Facebook, and I just started dancing. Avram Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel, Avram Avinu. And figured, look, this is the place where we come from. So the birthplace of the Jewish people is not in Egypt, not in the land of Israel. You could say that the birthplace of the Jewish people is right here, beneath this camel, in Haran. But the history of Jews starts, the history of Jews in Turkey, the recorded history, besides that of the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and our foremothers who were born in Turkey, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, starts in the year 700 BCE. The first time Jews of Turkey are mentioned in the Bible by the prophet Obadiah. And he mentions that there are exiles of Jerusalem. That is before the destruction of the first temple. There are exiles that are with the Canaanites in Seraphat, and they're removed of Jerusalem that is with the Sepharad. Now, normally people say Sepharad is Spain. That is how Sepharad is commonly known today. But the association of the name Sepharad with Spain is a more modern association. Modern, Judaism modern doesn't really mean something that happened in the past 20 years. Modern means about 800 years. We have a long history, so 800 years is modern. That is when Jews started associating Sepharad with Spain. Before that, Jews called Spain Hispania. That is how the Talmud calls it. The actual city Sepharad is a city which is in today Turkey, called Sardes, or in the past it was called Sephardes. And when the prophet Avad speaks about the Jews of Jerusalem, which are in Sepharad, he speaks about the city of Sardes. How do Jews come to Sardes? So we've got to go a little bit back in history. King David built his capital in Jerusalem. After he died, his son Solomon took over and built a temple in Jerusalem. After Solomon died, his son Rehavam took charge. Rehavam wasn't that great of a politician. The first thing he did was raise taxes. Not sure if raising taxes is a very political thing in the US, but I'm in Turkey. So Rehavam raised taxes, and he tried to force the people to pay those taxes, and they refused. They rebelled, and the Davidic kingdom split into two. The northern part became the land of Israel, where 10 tribes have resided. The southern part became the kingdom of Judea, where the Davidic lineage of the tribe of Judea was ruling. These two nation states, these two rivaling states, rivaling kingdoms, were at times at peace with each other, at times at war. But they became weaker and weaker and came under the conquest and power of two rivaling great powers of the time, the Assyrians in the north and the Egyptians to the south. These two nation states were sandwiched in between these two great powers of the time. Sometimes it pledged allegiance to the Egyptians, sometimes to the Assyrians. The Assyrian Empire got into, we'll call it, misagreement with the northern empire of Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel. And in the year 322 BC, they have started to conquer the northern kingdom. Their policy at the time was that of population exchange. Once they conquered the land, they removed its inhabitants and brought them over to Assyria and replaced the original inhabitants with other people. In the year 322, finally they exiled the entire population of the northern kingdom of Israel and replaced them with other people. Those 10 tribes who lived in the northern kingdom were lost and never found again. In the year 700 BC, so 20 years after the destruction of the northern kingdom, Sancherib fought with the Judean king Chizkiah, because Chizkiah withheld tribute to Sancherib. And he began conquering cities in Judea. He conquered the second most important city of Lachish. And the Jews of Lachish were exiled again to Assyria. Some of them Sancherib did not conquer the city, the capital of Jerusalem, though he tried. The Bible tells us that in the middle of the night, he disappeared with his soldiers. This is also found in this Tyler prism from the British Museum, which speaks about Sancherib's conquest in Judea, how he destroyed 42 cities, but he does not mention that he captured Jerusalem. He just held Chizkiah like a caged bird. But then eventually, he did take a whole bunch of people from Jerusalem, or people who were under the rule of Jerusalem, and brought them to Assyria. The most eastern city of Assyria was that of Sardis. Jews have lived there from 700 BC until we find records of them being there in the 3rd century as well, where they had the permission to build themselves their own synagogue, as recorded by Josephus. That synagogue, which they built for themselves in the most eastern city of ancient Assyria, is still intact and is still there today. This is the synagogue. I was there last year with my kids. We ate matzah, as you could see, on Pesach. It looks very similar to a modern synagogue of today. This is the Aron Kodesh, the ark where the Torah was held. It's not just the design. And we know that this is where the Torah was held because right on the bottom, there is an inscription in Greek that says, this is the place where the holy books are held. It's a huge synagogue. It could hold some 1,000 worshippers at the same time. And look at this. This is the place where they read the Torah from. Right in smack in the middle of the synagogue. But that is not the only place where Jews have lived in Turkey in antiquity. Very, very beautiful place that soon we're going to tour is the city of Cappadocia, a place which is mentioned some 20 times in the Talmud, and a city that has effect on every Jewish home today. You know why? Because after the temple was destroyed in year 68, the rabbis gathered in the city of Yavne, and they were discussing how can they preserve Judaism after the destruction of the temple. And they're discussing the laws of Shabbat, the laws of lighting the Shabbat candles. And one of the great rabbis, an old Kohen who served at the temple, said that the Shabbat candles can only be lit using olive oil. Because this is the way it was used in Jerusalem during the temple times. And the Talmud records that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri stood up on his feet and said, this was true when everybody was living in Jerusalem. But today we're in a total different situation. What would the Jews of the diaspora do today? What would the Jews of Babylonia? They don't have olive oil, they only have sesame oil. The Jews of Persia, they only have walnut oil. The Jews of Alexandria, they have only turp oil. And the Jews of Cappadocia, of Kaputkia, they only have neft, fossil fuel oil. The first place in the world that used fossil fuels was in Cappadocia. And the reason is because Cappadocia is such interesting terrain where the ground was washed up and rocks were remained. This is Cappadocia. Beautiful place to visit. I was there with my son this summer. We went horseback riding. See these beautiful natural rock formation. Now people lived in these rocks and still do today. Some hotels are placed in these rocks. If you ever have a plan to come to visit Turkey, definitely don't miss Cappadocia. We stayed in this cave hotel, not far from the center of Cappadocia. This is the view. Thinking that this is a place where Jews lived and had an effect on every Jewish home today. Today when we light Shabbat candles, using paraffin, which is a byproduct of petroleum, fossil fuel, it's only because of the Jews in Cappadocia. Because that is the type of fuel that they used, and the Talmud concludes that you could light with all types of oils, including paraffin, including petroleum. In the distance, we could see a mountain. This is called Mount Ergius. To the foot of the mountain is the city of Kayseri, an ancient city. A city where in the year 320, there was a great war between the Persian Sassanid king Shupur I, or as the Talmud called him, Shuvor Malka. And he had a great war with one of the last emperors of Rome, Valery. Valery lost the war. It was one of the last great battles of the Roman Empire. The Roman emperor was taken captive and was used as a stool for Shvur Malka, for Shupur I, to climb on his horse for the next 4 years. The Talmud records that during that war, 12,000 Jews died in Kayseri. Kayseri, or Caesarea, at that time was one of the greatest cities in the Roman Empire. Some 400 inhabitants lived in Kayseri. And 12,000 Jews died during the war. That is because, which might sound a little funny, but Jews at those days, after their destruction of their homeland, people going out, they found themselves as a job, or many Jews found themselves a job as mercenaries for the Roman Empire. We find Jewish military camps in Egypt, and we find Jewish military camps in Caesarea and Kayseri. The 12,000 Jews, as the Talmud records, Inu de avdu anafsha, iu de garmu ledidayu. They caused it to themselves to be killed in the war because they joined the ranks of the Roman Empire. That is Kayseri, right here in the distance, looking out from Cappadocia to the mountain of Ergius. So in antiquity, Jews lived all over Turkey, all over what we call modern-day Turkey. Here, the Jews of Ephesus. This is the remains of the great library of Ephesus, or the theater where Paul, one of the messengers of Christianity, spoke to the Jewish community in trying to bring the message of Christianity to them at the time. He was arrested here. He spoke to the Jewish community. It is quite interesting because from the earliest records of Jewish communities in Anatolia are actually those mentioned by the early Christians, who were in fact Jewish, but who changed their religion to Christianity. And from Ephesus, we come to a city called Aphrodisias. Now here's something quite interesting. I'm sure that Rabbi Khan, for him to run his operation, he collects money, right? Like all rabbis do that. You know since when? We have a record for at least 1800 years that Jews donate money for the upkeep of synagogue and have their names engraved on the wall. For those obviously who give a significant donation. And here is a list of 130 donors to the Jewish community of Aphrodisias. This list, which was affixed to the ancient synagogue, lists a whole bunch of names, 130 people. Jacob the Kohen, and Judah the shoemaker, and some Jews and some non-Jews who donated for the upkeep of the ancient city of Aphrodisias. Aphrodisias is right next to Laodicea, famously called Ludim in the Talmud, or Ludkia. This is a city where Jews have lived. Rabbi Meir, one of the greatest sages of the Talmud, has lived there. Here are some remains of Jewish symbols, later changed into Christian symbols that we could see on top. And that is right next to Hierapolis, or Pamukkale. It's a beautiful picture. Looks like snow, but it's not. It's a natural formation of water coming out in a natural spring, carrying with it a mineral which is then baked onto the rock with the sun. It's a natural phenomena in Hierapolis. This water fountain, or this water spring, has been considered to be a place of healing for many thousands of years until today. And these hot water springs in the city of Hierapolis have been an attraction for many tourists today, as they have been for many people who seeked healing 2,000 years ago. Josephus Flavius, a famous Jewish historian and Kohen, records that some 30-something Jews, 30,000 Jews have lived here around the year 2000. He knows that because he found a record of a Roman commander that kidnapped a Jew carrying money to the temple in Jerusalem. And he took from him 12,000 golden pieces, which was collected by the Jews, since the Torah commands that every Jew from the age of 20 and up should give a half a shekel, a half a silver coin, for the upkeep of the temple. A half a silver coin at the time equal to the 12 chunks of gold. And that is how they concluded that some 30,000 Jews have lived in Hierapolis around the year 2000. The only Jewish thing that remained that I found in Hierapolis is a grave. You can see here a menorah sign. It remained for 2,000 years, right at the entrance of Hierapolis. Another menorah sign, this time in Priene. Beautiful ancient city on the Aegean coast. Went together with my son, and we were looking for the remains of the synagogue until we came across this pile of rocks, and where we found also this menorah. Not much is left, but here is the place where the Torah were held, towards Jerusalem, and this is the place this is the ancient synagogue of Priene. Jews have lived in Turkey, as I mentioned, ever since. But the main Jewish community of today is not those that remain from antiquity. Those Jews of antiquity, we call them Romaniot, or Jews of the Roman Empire. The main Jewish community of today are the Jews who came here post the year 1492, 1497, after the expulsion from Spain and Portugal. When the Jews from Spain and Portugal came to today's modern-day Turkey, they found here a Jewish community, the Romaniot Jewish community, as well as another Jewish community that lived here, and we'll speak about it a little bit later. The Ashkenazi Jews. Ashkenazi Jews who have been in Turkey from the year 1250 and on, after the expulsion of Jews from Hungary and France. But the main Jewish community of today is here since 1492 and 1497. The Sephardic Jews who speak Ladino. When the Sephardic Jews came here, and they found, and that is something that I always think about, it's not very often spoken about, that who are these Sephardic Jews who came from Spain to Turkey? Maybe quite contrary to the common thinking. those Sephardic Jews were the most religious Jews of Spain. Think about it. Those Jews who left Spain are those who wanted to go to the synagogue in the morning. Those who wanted to live their life in such an outwardly Jewish way. Who wanted to eat matzah and Passover without any problems. Who wanted to sit in the sukkah and Sukkot. Who wanted to light candles on Hanukkah and not in hiding. Those are the Jews who left Spain. And they came all over to Turkey and they find the Jewish community and it wasn't orthodox enough for them. We have records like this one in front of us from Rabbi Shmuel de Medina, who was the chief rabbi of Thessaloniki, second generation Sephardic Jew. And those issues that the Sephardic Jews have encountered when they came here after the expulsion from Spain still had their echoes during his time. The Sephardic Jews did not like the way the Jews of Turkey, the Ashkenazi Jews or the Ammonite Jews, have slaughtered their meats. And they've opened their own slaughterhouse. This caused a great rift between the communities. And eventually it caused two separate but equal communities in all over the Middle East. There were the ancient Romaniot and Ashkenazi Jews, and the newcomers, Sephardic Jews. The newcomers were much more numerous than those Jews who were here, and eventually it totally changed the landscape of Judaism in the Middle East, in Turkey, in Israel, and elsewhere. Here are pictures of the ancient Jewish community of Bursa. Only 30 Jews are left in Bursa. And they pray in these two synagogues. This one and this. This synagogue is called Gerush synagogue. Gerush means exiles. But look at this beautiful, beautiful thing. On top of the Torahs, we find it's a Turkish symbol of a star and moon. Jews have always been patriotic of the country where they live in. As Jews in America are American patriots, so were the Jews who came to live in Turkey. This also follows a very ancient custom. After the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem, the prophet Jeremiah sent a letter to the Jews of Babylonia. It's recorded in the Bible, in the book of Jeremiah. And in that book, he writes like that: seek the welfare of the city in which you live in, because when it will prosper, so will you. Seek the welfare of the country, of the city to which I exiled you to. Ki bishloma yeh lachem shalom. Because when it will be in peace, so will you be in peace. Ever since, Jews have been very much patriotic and committed to the country in which they lived in. And Jews in Turkey, no different. Jews in Turkey, especially after they came here from Spain, have really felt in depth, have really felt that they owe gratitude to the Ottoman Empire, which welcomed them after they were thrown out of Spain. Yet, the small Jewish community of Bursa is not going to remain there, unfortunately, forever. Everybody's over 85 and up. This is what I saw in the synagogue, getting ready. That is what they said. Beautiful synagogue. Look at this. Mr. El Nekaveh, he watches the synagogue Kahal Kadosh Girush. A beautiful library and old documents. And we'll come to another city, another ancient Jewish settlement, the city of Izmir. Beautiful view from the bay. Izmir was a very famous Jewish city, a city of rabbis, of scholars, called the city of synagogues, because this city that today has only about 800 to 1,000 Jews, maybe less, is full of synagogues. Synagogues and other Jewish cemeteries, Jewish places. Great rabbis are buried in Izmir. Rabbi Shmuel Avraham, Rabbi Aaron Chazan, beautiful mikvah, Rabbi Shlomo Arditi, Rabbi Yosef Iskapa, Rabbi Eliyahu Cohen, Rabbi Chaim Palachi, Rabbi Avram Palachi. And we came to this synagogue street. This is called the Chavra Sokak. On this street alone, there are 12 or 15 synagogues right next to each other. Magen David, Chief Rabbinate, Portugal, Shalom, La Signora. Forgot the name of the Ashkenazi synagogue, I think it was. Al-Ghazi synagogue, Chevra synagogue, and another one. A whole bunch of synagogues on one street. Chavra Sokak. Chavra, Chevra. Congregation. So the congregation street has some 15 synagogues, 12 or 15 synagogues right next to each other. And right across is another historical monument of another facade of Jewish history, the house of the false Messiah Shabbatai Tzvi. Today, the Jewish community of Izmir has about 800 people. They struggle to keep the synagogues open. It's really beautiful to see how those synagogues in the Chavra Street are used every day, pre-corona, obviously. They're being fixed, renovated, and they're making sure that it remains intact. Really beautiful place, Izmir. Very relaxing, very beautiful. We are now in Gallipoli, place of great battle between Anzac battle between the First World War, between the Ottoman forces and the New Zealand and English French coalition. And while in Gallipoli, saw this shepherd walking with his sheep, and I couldn't hold myself back from thinking, wow, this is exactly like Abraham must have looked like, roaming around with his sheep right there in this ancient land. In Gallipoli, there was a Jewish community. Shabtai Tzvi, the false Messiah, which I mentioned before, has been locked up in jail in Gallipoli after he pronounced himself Messiah. But that's all that remains from the Jewish community, is this wall, the entrance to the ancient synagogue. Unfortunately, the synagogue is in ruins. This street too is called the Chavra Street, the Congregation Street. But that's all that is remained. And of course, a Jewish cemetery. We found here some headstones which are more than 600 years old. Not in such a great shape, but at least you could see it's a cemetery. When we crossed the Dardanelles Straits, and we came to the city of Çanakkale, we found the cemetery in a much worse situation. It has become a park where people do mangal or barbecues on top. But the synagogue is in great shape. The Etz Chaim synagogue, or the Makor Chaim synagogue of of Çanakkale. There's only one Jew lives in Çanakkale today, but the synagogue is still open every single day. Çanakkale is a place of Troy, the ancient city of Troy, the Trojan horse. And this is the ancient city of Troy. But before we continue our street, we're going to Ayvalik. Beautiful islands, beautiful view, and we come to the city of Bergamo. If any of you have ever been in Berlin, very famous Pergamon Museum are the remnants of this Pergamo ancient city that were brought or stolen by the Germans and brought over to Berlin and formed today the Bergamo Museum. Bergamo was also an ancient Jewish city, or a city where Jews lived. And this is the synagogue. It looks quite new. Beautiful synagogue. It was rebuilt just 2 years ago. Many people today complain about the politics of the Turkish government against Israel. Understandably so. But while people may have their grievances with the Turkish politics, we should not ignore the fact that the Turkish government has taken upon itself to rebuild ancient Jewish synagogues. They've rebuilt 4 of them in the past 5 years. Here is one. They have researched how the old synagogue had looked like and rebuilt it exactly as it was. They did the same in Edirne, in Antep, in Kilis, and in many other places. But ancient Jewish life, here this is another one, in Limira, this is the synagogue. We know that it's a synagogue because there's a mikveh, a ritual bath right here on the side. Another ancient synagogue, Maria Andriaki. You know what it says here? I'm sure you know. Ose shalom bimroma, uyase shalom al. Prayer for peace. From the ancient synagogue of Maria Andriaki, right on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Other remains are in Hattusha, ancient Jewish headstones. We come to Malatya, the capital of apricots, of dried apricots. You see, they're sun-dried right here in the field. And after they're sun-dried, they're packed up and shipped to the US. This is actually from pictures from a plant that dries apricots to sell in Costco. You have Costco by you, right? So if you go and pick up some apricots, you might see them here, how they looked in the summer. This is from Malatya. Malatya is right next to this great mountain, Mount Nimrod. Nimrod. We read about him in Genesis, in Noah. And this is where he was, in Mount Nimrod. And right on top of it, there is a great monument built by none other than Antiochus. King Antiochus built himself, the Antiochus I, on top of this great Mount Nimrod, built himself a shrine where he should be buried. We're not sure if he was actually buried there, but he built these huge statues of himself. Went there at 4 o'clock in the morning with my son to see the sunrise, see these beautiful colors of the sun rays on the ancient statues in the mountain. Really, my son wasn't really happy to get up. I'm right now at 4:30 again here. I don't mind, but my son, he wasn't really happy to wake up at 4 o'clock to see these views. But really a place to go and see. We came to Malatya from an ancient city of Diyarbakir, where we met the last Jew of Diyarbakir and the most eastern part of Turkey. on the banks of the Chidekel, one of the 4 rivers mentioned in Genesis, the Tigris River. Right here, you see in the distance the city of Diyarbakir with the ancient walls made of black stone. And the last Jew of Diyarbakir is Selim. And he tells me, Rabbi, I got to show you a beautiful synagogue, which I heard exists in the village of Chermik, an hour and a half drive from here. I've never been, he tells me, but let's go look for it. We traveled and we found the synagogue. It's in ruins. This old gentleman has showed us the way. And he said when he was a kid, there were a whole bunch of Jews playing there. And we found a 400-year-old synagogue in Chermik. Today it is used as a storage, but this is the ark. This is the synagogue. And from the inscription, it's obvious that this synagogue, Baruch Ata Bevoecha, Baruch Ata Betzetecha, synagogue has seen much better days. It was built some 400 years ago. Jews lived in that region, and we spoke before about the Romanio Jews, Jews of the Roman Empire. We spoke about the Sephardic Jews, and here we're going to speak about a whole different Jewish culture. We speak about the Kurdish Jews, the Jews of Kurdistan. These Jews have lived here since the destruction of the first temple. They're not Sephardic, they're not Romaniot, they're not Ashkenazi. We're speaking about the 4th Jewish custom, a 4th Jewish population, the Jews of Kurdistan. They lived in Diyarbakir and they lived in Netzivin, Nusaybin. Netzivin, another city mentioned in the Talmud. The Talmud in Tractate Pesachim says that Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, one of the ancient rabbis of the Talmud, lived in Nusaybin, had a great school over there. And the Jews of Nusaybin, of Netzivin, used to travel every year to offer the Paschal Lamb in Jerusalem. And the Talmud brings a story how one of his neighbors, a non-Jew, also used to travel from Nusaybin, from Netzivin, all the way to Jerusalem to offer the Paschal Lamb. No Jews left in Nusaybin today, which is on the border of Syria. But some 20 kilometers from there, 15 miles, up on a mountain, is the city of Mardin. We got there Friday afternoon. We got into the first hotel, which we were able to find. We get into our room, and this is what's on the wall. We thought it's a coincidence, just a geometric symbol. But every door, every room had this symbol. He asked the owner, what is this? He says, I don't know. I bought this building some 50 years ago. Apparently, it was a synagogue or a Jewish home. And every frame is decorated with a Magen David, a Star of David. No Jews live in Mardin today. This is the remain of the synagogue. But Mardin is a city where people still speak Aramaic, the ancient language of the Talmud. They write in Aramaic. This is a picture of a monastery. It is called Mor Gavriel. But just as an example, you can see how they spell Gavriel. Very similar to Hebrew. Gimel Bet Resh. Aleph Lamed. Not exactly like our script, but very, very similar. We stayed there for Shabbat, enjoyed the beautiful views of Mesopotamia right in front of us, and moved on with our trip. Gobekli Tepe. And we came to Gaziantep. We spoke about the Ashkenazi Jews, we spoke about the Romaniot Jews, we spoke about the Sephardic Jews, Kurdish Jews, we speak about a little bit about Syrian Jews who lived in Antep. If you ever heard of the Antebi family, this is where they come from, Antep, or Gaziantep today. These are pictures of the opening of the ancient synagogue that was rebuilt last year on Hanukkah, was the opening. This is the synagogue today, the synagogue of Antep. It was locked when we came. Nobody wanted to open it for us until We had the Turkish president himself called up the city authorities to open the synagogue for me and my son, and we're able to pray there during Tisha B'Av. The 9th of Av, we prayed in Gaziantep. And here is a mikveh in the ancient city, a ritual bath. A couple of 100 years old ritual bath from the city of Gaziantep. Another synagogue from Kilis on the border of Syria, also rebuilt by the Turkish government just a few years ago. Oh, I'm time for Hanukkah. Next week is Hanukkah. And here we're in the ancient city of Antioch. This is where Hanukkah started. This is where Antiochus lived. Named after him, the city of Antakya of today is a home for a small Jewish community. Mr. Azur Genudiolu takes care of the synagogue. Only 7 Jews live there. Azur Bey comes every morning to the synagogue, fills up oil, lights candles, puts on his tefillin, prays, and he tells me, Rabbi, I'm not religious. I come every morning to the synagogue and I put on my tefillin. Yes, I read some psalms after my prayers. I didn't eat chicken for the past 7 months because the slaughterer was not able to come because of the pandemic, but I'm not very religious. I gave him a big hug and said, I wish everybody was irreligious as you are. We prayed together with the Jews of Antakya, the 7 remaining Jews of Antakya in the ancient cemetery, and continue on from there. Oh, let's first see some views of Antakya. Really reminds you of the ancient city of Tzfat, where I was born, or the ancient city of Jerusalem. It was wonderful to see the Jamal family visit the synagogue. Beautiful place. You see, it's called Antakya, or Antiochia in Hebrew, for Antiochus. We came to the city of Adana, not far from Tarsus or Tarshish. Only 4 Jews remain in Adana. They go every Shabbat to the synagogue and pray there to make sure the synagogue doesn't close down. Visited the city of Konya, a very spiritual center for the Sufi Muslims. And we're almost back to Istanbul. With our bikes, the car, the 6,000 miles. Back in Istanbul. So we spoke about 6 different Jewish civilizations. We spoke about the Romaniot Jews of antiquity, the Ashkenazi Jews. We spoke about the Sephardic Jews, the Kurdish Jews, the Syrian Jews. We didn't speak about the Karaite Jews. We didn't speak about other Jews here. Time is running out. So let's just move on to Jewish life today in Turkey. A year and a half ago, we had the conference of rabbis of various Chabad houses all over the world, small Jewish communities, Africa and Europe. And we were sitting here in the Ashkenazi synagogue. While there, we spoke to the chief rabbi of Turkey, who told us, you know how I am a rabbi and how I remained a committed Jew? It is thanks to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who opened a yeshiva here, a house of study, in 1963, and showed us this picture, where the Rebbe's emissary, Rabbi Binyamin Gorodetsky, sits in the middle, and him as a young kid standing in the back and participating in study. He says, thanks to that yeshiva that was opened by the Rebbe, that is how I'm today a chief rabbi. But Chabad of Turkey officially opened here in the year 2001. Rabbi Mendy and Miriam Polish joined us in 2011. We've been active here ever since. having Pesach Seders, prayers in the Ashkenazi synagogues, concerts, Purim events, Shabbat meals, Hanukkah, daily minyan for kids in the Jewish school, the fill-in campaign, making old people happy in the old age home. And this is Jewish life in Turkey. I thank you for listening. Thank you for being with me so early in the morning. And if they have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So thank you, Rabbi Mendy. This was fascinating. I was fascinated with you in yeshiva, but this brought back good memories. But so much information in such little time. So we will open the floor to questions. I know there were some questions in the chat about why they're rebuilding these ancient synagogues if there's no Jews living in these towns or cities. Someone did respond that it's because tourism, but if there's anything else you want to add to that, and we could either put your questions in the chat box or you could unmute and we could go along, or raise your hand. I could unmute you and you could ask those questions. Someone did ask in the chat box, any place where we can find a list of synagogues are located, if you want to visit them, maybe not to bike there, but are there a list of synagogues?
I'm not sure there's a list of synagogues, and more of them are found from time to time. I'm not sure. Maybe on Wikipedia, or maybe if somebody knows where you can to find the list. More than I don't know. Maybe I should compile a list and publish it. Good idea.
There's another question here that there are articles about how they are using the pandemic as a way to promote anti-Semitism. How is this being handled? I'm not sure if this is specifically about you.
I don't think it's true.
The floor is open.
The pandemic has affected everybody. Affected the psychology of many people, including those people who are anti-Semites, including those people who have paranoias about anti-Semitism.
Okay, Sheldon, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yes, I also put the comment in the chat box. I had a tour. I did a tour of Turkey, and mainly the events that are mentioned, and was the Ottoman Empire, the idea of Constantine, and the development of Constantinople, which is modern day Istanbul. They talked about, I went to Troy. They mentioned Heinrich Schliemann. They mentioned Izmir, where they make the tiles. I went to Cappadocia, and nowhere did they mention anything about Jewish influence. Most of it is on the Ottoman Empire and such subjects like that. Went to Gallipoli, and it had to do with Churchill. He almost lost his ability to rule in England because of his actions in what happened in Gallipoli. So this presentation, it was enlightening because my perspective, the way I look at my perception is that it's Christian and it's Muslim, and I didn't realize there is a Jewish influence in Turkey.
Thank you, Sheldon. I know we have on here, we have Dina Eliezer, who is actually from Izmir, and you're writing that it's a shame that there's no showing of the beautiful synagogue in Izmir. I'm sure you have many pictures of your trip, Rabbi Mendy.
I do have, and I had to cramp lots of information in 1 hour. Go on and on and on. So I also didn't show here any pictures of the 18 synagogues of Istanbul. We didn't show here pictures of the synagogues of Kirklareli, of Edirne, of Çorlu, of many other places, of Ankara. It's a taste. Maybe it's an invitation for everybody to come and visit themselves.
Yes, yes. Dina, go ahead.
He visited the ancient library in Izmir.
Sorry?
Did you get a chance to visit the ancient library in Izmir?
I did not visit the library in Izmir. I was in Izmir for 4 days this summer. I've been in Izmir many, many times, and I'm going to be in Izmir on Monday again. I did not visit the ancient library, but now that you mention, I'll speak to my good friend Mr. Benjuya or Mr. Daniel Levy.
Please give them my regards. I heard about you 20 years ago, actually, because around the same time that you arrived to Istanbul, I arrived to Izmir. I was born in Izmir, but when I was 2 months old, my parents immigrated to Israel. And 20 years ago, I was invited by the community to help them start a Jewish school. So around the same time, I used to come for 5 years. I came to Turkey every summer to train the teachers. And a lot of people came from Istanbul to Çeşme. That's their summer retreat. And they were all talking about the Ashkenazi rabbi who arrived to Istanbul and opened a school. And quite frankly, at the beginning, they didn't know how to handle this. But as the year progressed, they were really praising you and raving about the classes and the programs and everything that you did there, which was really very nice. We were struggling in Izmir with 130 children to open a school. And actually, the reason I ask you about the library is because one of the projects that I had there was to restore that library. So I actually collected all the old books from all the old synagogues to one location, and from Chacham Chaneh also, from the rabbinic center. And they're right now, they're in the old hospital, the Jewish hospital. They're located over there.
Right. Now, the school of Izmir is closed down, as I'm sure you know.
The Talmud Torah is closed. Right now, the children obviously grew up, and they usually when they get to the college age, they leave. Rabbi Alaluf, actually, he was there. He was the rabbi of Izmir when I arrived there. He's in Istanbul right now. He teaches.
Right. So Rabbi Yitzchak Alaluf, a very good friend of mine, he lives in Istanbul for the past 15 years. From after when the school closed down, so he had to move to Istanbul and put his kids in the Jewish school in Istanbul.
It's right. We opened not a Jewish school because you're not allowed in Turkey. Once you close a school, by law, you're not allowed to open a religious school in the country. So actually, our school was, you can open a school if it's inside the synagogue. If it's inside the Jewish institution, you can open a school. So that's why ours was some kind of a clandestine synagogue. We had to rent an apartment and say that it's like a club and not a school. But also, Rabbi Alaluf, by the way, he was there when I was working on the restoration of the library, and he gave me a book. He gave me the book of Sefer Bereshit in Ladino, and it used to belong to his great grandfather. And because he didn't know Ladino very well, so as a gift for my work there, he gave me his great grandfather a book in Ladino. Hello, it's much bigger. It's big like that.
Here, this is a Chumash Bereshit in Ladino. So he's mentioned about the Ashkenazi rabbi. It is quite interesting that I am the last rabbi in Istanbul to actually give a Torah lesson in Ladino pre-pandemic. Every Tuesday night, I used to give a Torah lesson in Ladino for some 20, 30 people. For the past 3-4 years, however, it changed into Turkish because people stopped speaking Ladino and they just they couldn't keep up.
That's right.
So it is quite a turn of history that the last rabbi to give classes in Ladino is actually the rabbi of the Ashkenazi community.
You know, one of the things when I arrived to Izmir and they asked me to write the program for the children there, it was really very important for me that the children in Izmir will grow up with the traditions of the people of their own family. So most of the books, I brought a whole suitcase with books from the United States, and they were most with Ashkenazic rituals and things like that. So we actually, for 3 days, we spent visiting homes and talking to the elderly and the families in order to find out what are the real traditions of their community. And we rewrote the whole program for the school so it will reflect what they knew in their own home, how to celebrate Pesach and how to celebrate Purim, what are the foods that they did. So we had to rewrite the whole curriculum in order to make it more real for the people who live there.
Very beautiful. So let me just end with the story about the Ashkenazis of Izmir.
Right, there's someone that he's going to end, but there's someone that asked the question. You take another question, Mendy?
I'll take a question after this.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
In year 1700, and came a rabbi to Izmir. He was born in Jerusalem. He studied in Tzfat. His name was Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen Rappaport.
He wrote books.
He wrote a book called Batei Kehuna.
That's right.
He was an Ashkenazi Jew who was born in Jerusalem, studied in Tzfat, and he came to collect money in Izmir to support the yeshiva of the yeshiva in Jerusalem in Tzfat. They loved him, and they begged him to stay in Izmir, and he became the chief rabbi of Izmir. The Ashkenazi Jew, Rabbi Yitzchak Rappaport, became the Ashkenazi Chacham, the Chacham Bashi of Izmir. Then he moved to Jerusalem in 1749 to become the Rishon LeZion, the Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel. He was the only Ashkenazi Sephardi chief rabbi. Now, I have been to a synagogue in Manisa, not far from Izmir, and this is what has remained. Look at this, beautiful. Habet Knesset Hazeh, this synagogue was built in year Tafkuf Samach, im minhagim, with customs of Harav Batei Kehuna. It was built with using the custom of the rabbi who wrote the book Batei Kehuna, and that Batei Kehuna is the book of Rabbi Yitzchak Rappaport. In other words, this synagogue in Manisa is a synagogue that followed the customs, the Ashkenazi customs of the chief rabbi of Izmir. Another very interesting thing of Izmir, if we mentioned already Ashkenazim and Izmir, look at this book. This is a book called Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, written by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, belonged to Beit HaKnesset Shel Adat Ashkenazim be'Izmir, the synagogue of Ashkenazi Jews of Izmir. There's a stamp inside that says Deutsche Israelitische Tempel, Smyrna, the German Jewish synagogue of Izmir, Beit HaKnesset Ashkenazim. Now, this particular book has quite an interesting history, because on the last page of the book, it says that this book belongs to Rabbi Levi Schneerson. That this book belongs to Rabbi Levi Schneerson. He even has his signature here. It says Levi Yitzchak. Rabbi Levi Schneerson was the father of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And how does his book, he lived in Ukraine, how his book ends up in Izmir and gets a stamp from Adat Ashkenazim of Izmir and then ends up in my hands is a mystery to me till today.
Wow, quite fascinating.
You will find, if you visit the library in Izmir, if they still have the list of all the books, because that's there are 1,700 books there. There is Rappaport's book is there as well.
Today, the ancient books have lost great value because everything is available on the internet. All ancient books are available today on HebrewBooks.org. Has 100,000 books for free available for anybody who wants to download and read it.
That's right. But one of the things that is very interesting about these books is that they came from the Chacham Chaneh, where the rabbis used to meet and study. And that's where they kept it. What's interesting about those books is there is the handwriting on the side of the book. When they studied, they will write in solitreo. So I took pictures of all of those. I mean, every day when I worked there at 3 o'clock, usually it was study time for me. I would stand in the middle of the room, turn around 10 times and just point to a place, pull out the book and study it. I speak Ladino fluently. And many of those books have commentaries on the pages from the rabbis from the time that they were studying it. Many of those copies I have with me that I brought, and I'm practicing trying to decipher them. They're written all in solitreo, in the Sephardic handwriting, which is very difficult to decipher.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dina, for this wonderful information. Maybe you'll join Rabbi Mendy's class when he gives it in Ladino. Josh, you had a question. You can unmute.
Yeah, I had two questions. That the street that has 12 synagogues on it, I find fascinating. That what was the population that you could support 12 synagogues, and why would you pack them into one street, like almost like a Chinatown here in the United States?
Jews like to congregate with their friends, and it's quite normal. Jews who were more studious wanted to be with other studious Jews. Jews who wanted the different, more melodious service went to the melodious Jews. Don't forget, those are people who also divided then by different guilds and different jobs. We have in Istanbul, for example, we have on the same street, we have the synagogue of Tofrei Begadim, or the Schneider temple, the people for the seamstress, or for whoever the tailor synagogue. There is a synagogue for the richer people, for the poorer people. It's very hard to try to take history and use our modern glasses and look at it in that way. I'm sure there are many other reasons. There's some synagogues that were built for rabbis to speak. For example, we saw before the Magen David synagogue was built, the synagogue of Rabbi Chaim Palachi. People who wanted to hear the specific rabbi went to his synagogue. People wanted to another rabbi, went to their synagogue. Synagogues, Izmir was a city of 20, 30, 40,000 Jews, great scholars, and every scholar had his own yeshiva, his own study hall, his own style of teaching, his own style of lectures, and people went to the various synagogues to have their thing. Other synagogues are family synagogues. Specific families were gathered in a specific synagogue, being done so for generations. I'm sure some synagogues were opened because of rifts or splits in different communities. Also happens. Community, they live together, they outgrow their boundaries, and they get into over speeches, over political views, and open another synagogue. Things happen.
Rabbi, if you will allow me also, in Izmir, by the way, the synagogues are in the middle of the marketplace, in the middle of the shuk. And a lot of the Jews, that's where they used to work. So they used to do the Shacharit, the Mincha, the Ma'ariv. It had to be really close to where they are. It's really in the middle of the market.
In those days, they lived there. Today, it is only the market. In ancient times, the people lived in those streets.
Josh, you had another question?
Yeah, the other question was, I'm really surprised. First of all, I had no idea how historic Turkey was to the Jewish people. Like, it seems like all the action was there. But in modern day, in a predominantly Muslim country, I'm just shocked that the government is spending money investing in rebuilding and restoring synagogues. To me, that seems counterintuitive to what I thought life in Turkey would be like.
So it's a good thing that we had this presentation.
I'm very surprised. I said to Rabbi Kahan that we'd be happy to have you come to Medford and we can show you all the historic Jewish sites of Medford. It won't be a very long tour.
It'll be quite costly for such a short tour. Okay.
Someone has just a question. They were taken aback hear that some of the cemeteries are now places where people just hang out, relax, and have barbecues. Maybe it's a culture. Is there any regulation regarding that? Do you have any insight on that?
We are in court in order to reclaim back the land. It's not so simple. It is, everything is sociology. At the end of the day, for us Jews, cemeteries are something very holy and very important. We preserve cemeteries. We cherish cemeteries. There's some places where there's a cemeteries kept up much nicer than even the synagogue or Jewish life. In Muslim societies, it is less so. A cemetery loses its holiness or its sanctity after 50 years. So the Muslims have a much less of an incline to keep up the cemetery. So families don't, I see now in the chat, somebody asked, families don't visit those Jewish cemeteries. Some families do, but don't forget these cemeteries are very, very ancient cemeteries, 600-year-old cemeteries. Quite difficult to trace your roots all the way back there. If a person goes to a cemetery, he goes to see his parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. Okay? How far back do you go? Now, Rabbi Khan doesn't even go to cemeteries. That's because he's a Kohen, but that's a different story.
I wouldn't be able to do the tour that you did.
That's right.
One more question someone asked me privately. Do you experience any anti-Semitism currently?
I've never did. Of course, there are some anti-Semitic incidents which are more like articles and things in newspapers and things like that, but not on the street. I never had anything like that. No.
Okay, Rabbi Mendy, I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time, especially.
Thank you.
I guess you'll down in Shachrit. I'm not sure when sunrise is there, but thank you really for taking the time.
It's 5 o'clock in the morning. I'll take a coffee and go on to go have a bike ride, and then I'll daven Shacharit.
Laila Tov, thank you so
All the
much.
best. Take care.
Laila Tov.